done. So why multifamily? Um, it depends on your goal, right? It depends on your goal. What are you trying to get to? How much money are you trying to make? I think all of us, real estate is a financial thing. So it's what are your financial goals? Put a number to it. What's the number you're trying to hit? How can you hit that number, right? So if it's 50 units for you, if it's 100 units for you, if it's 10 units for you, what is the best way to get to the 100 units? Well, I can do 50 single family houses, 25 duplexes, or I can do two 25 unit houses, right? Which one is easier for you, right? And so that was kind of the question I had to answer for myself. Do I really want to drive to 50 different doors or replace 50 different roofs or have everything as accumulated or in one space as much as I can? And the answer was simply multifamily. And so that's kind of why I'm doing multifamily. Again, if you do multifamily, single family, you're going to pay your property manager 10%. If you have 100 units, a building with 100 units, you're probably going to pay somewhere around 5 to 8%. You're not going to pay more than 8%. So economies of scale is essentially the reason why you do multifamily, right? Everything becomes more efficient. It's more expensive to produce one car than it is to produce 100. When you have economies of scale, you're better suited, and so that's kind of why multifamily. So I'm just gonna go through kind of how I run numbers, and how I like essentially ended up to where I have two 6 unit buildings right now. So this is just kind of a scrap work. So how do you start? Find a market, pick your market, any market for whatever reason. Look at population trends. I think this market is going to blow up in the future. I've got family in that market. Whatever the reason is, pick a market and then dive deep. That's kind of the key, right? So this is kind of a spreadsheet of the numbers I ran in Hartford, Connecticut, a bunch of deals that I ran for what I think the numbers are, right? This is before I ever put in a contract on any offer. I ran a bunch of numbers. I like went through a bunch of deals. What is the water bill for this building? And typically in multifamily, you're going to be paying the water bill. Electric is usually on the tenant. Trash you pay. There's usually a little bit of common electric. So in the walkways, there's some lights there that the landlord is going to be responsible for. So you have to figure out what all those numbers are, right? Because when you see a deal, how do you know what's right? How do you know, hey, this deal is too expensive because of why? Why is it too expensive? Why are they like, how can I make this deal work for me? Is it because the costs are too high? And how do you know the costs are too high? What are the expenses for multifamily? It's water, trash, taxes, insurance, things like that. How do I know if those numbers are too high or too low? You got to go through the process and dig deep and know your numbers, right? So for my deal, I know a 6 unit deal is going to be around $6,000 for water bill. I just know that I've done the deal enough, so I know stuff like that. So that's kind of the starting point, right? Where do I find my deals? Primarily on the MLS. That's kind of where you started. LoopNet, Crexy, Router.com, Zillow.com, everywhere anybody lists multifamily deals is where you look. I talked to every single realtor I can. If they had a deal that was slightly within my criteria, I started and I was like, I want 5 to 20 units. Anybody that has 5 to 20 units on the MLS, plus 30, minus something, right? There's always a range. Please, can I see your deal? Please, can you send me any deals that you get that's within this criteria? It's within this price range. Talk to every single one of them. Email, call, try to contact them however you can. If they're in an office, you can't get in contact with them. Find someone else in that office that you can talk to. Right? That's kind of the deal. Facebook groups as well. Real estate in Hartford, Connecticut. Real estate in Indianapolis. Just search that and you find a group and you find people doing things. You find wholesalers and meetups as well. So I join a meetup every Wednesday in Hartford, Connecticut as well. I don't live there. I don't know anything about the city. Never been there except for work one time, but the market is working for me. So that's kind of the background. This is kind of what I like to do. Like I said, this is what I do at work already. I look at numbers. So this is what I like to do. Someone has to do this on your team, right? Even if it's you, if you're not a numbers person and you know, like somebody has to do this, you have to have a feel for what your market is like. So that's kind of a brief introduction to how I find my deals and how the process all gets started. So now I'm gonna go into like a specific example of how I analyzed my 6 unit deal that I bought for cash flow. So not the real address, but it's 123 Hartford Street, Hartford, Connecticut, whatever, right? So it's a 6 unit deal. It was listed for 359. I ended up purchasing it for 340. NOI as listed was $39,000. I was estimating $60,000 worth of rehab. Didn't need to do any of that. 8% cap. Price per unit as listed, $56,000. Built in 1890, 6,000 square feet. Like I said, heating, tenants is typically responsible for heating in multifamily buildings. Hot water, tenants is responsible for that as well. It's usually gas. Electric, separately metered, usually responsible for that, except for the common electric stuff, right? So outdoor lighting and stuff like that, you'll be responsible for that. So, but for the electrical in their units, they're going to be responsible for that. Water, you're responsible for that, and sewer, you're responsible for that as the landlord, right? So you kind of have to know all that stuff before you're going into it. What my expenses going to be, and all that stuff. So that's kind of the background on this building. If I'm talking too fast, by the way, slow me down. Ask me questions. Stop me at any point and ask me questions. So that's kind of what this comes down to. So this is as listed. Everything I'm showing in this sheet is as listed. What is your income on your property? What are your expenses? I'm trying to get the expenses to be as low as possible and the income to be as high as possible, right? And so as listed, they were making $62,000. I think at the time I was buying it, they didn't have one tenant. One of the units were occupied. They ended up filling that unit before the purchase was completed. But so all these numbers here are the numbers I'm looking for. Anything that's too much outside of this is a red flag for me, right? So I kind of know the range of taxes. So what are your expenses? Property taxes, insurance, repairs and maintenance is usually 5% of whatever your gross scheduled income is. Property management fee, it was listed as 5%, but it's not going to be 5% for me. It's 9% for me. But it's good to know a starting point. This is what the deal is currently doing as listed. Utilities, $5,200, right? So these numbers all are within range. I've looked at a bunch of other deals. It's around $900 per unit for insurance. It's about $500 per unit for repairs and maintenance. So these numbers, if I see numbers that are deviating from this too much, it's a red flag for me. What is happening? Is there a water leak in the building? Is there something that is making the insurance so high? Is there an issue with the building? Is something too old to where the insurance needs more comfort, and so they charge more? Or if it's too low, like I had the second building I bought, the insurance was way too low. And what happened there? The seller actually has a lot of, it was with, like, I don't know, one of the big insurance companies, Geico or whatever you call it. And the seller had multiple properties with that same insurance. And so it happened to be lower for him. It's not going to be that low for me for sure, right? So that is a flag for me to know that, hey, it's not going to be this low for me. I better anticipate something different. So that's kind of what it was listed as. So this is kind of before and after. On the left side is before, right? So they're all 3-bedroom, 1-bath buildings, units. These are what their rents are as listed. I remember I said some tenants were paying, the landlord was responsible for their utilities. That's those two guys down here, right? The tenant was responsible for their utilities. It ended up costing us more than it was benefiting us. So they're paying slightly more, but it was not enough to cover the utilities they were using. So what my plan was, again, this is current as listed, these were the rent numbers. I was planning to take everything to 1,100, right? So this one will go down a little bit, this one goes down a little bit, but I'm not covering their utilities anymore. And that's gonna end me. So the total income doesn't change, but my expenses will change. My expenses will go down, right? And you see that in the next slide. So essentially, income, you have to understand what your income is doing and then what your expenses are doing. So this slide is explaining what the income is doing. Again, this is everything that was at when I bought it, and then this is what I'm anticipating it's going to be after a year of owning it. So when all the leases come due in a year of owning the place, this is what everything is going to come out to. I'm going to increase rents to 1,100, reduce the rents for these guys that are paying extra for utilities, and they're going to be responsible for their utilities eventually. So again, this is the income slide. So now I think the next one should be expenses. Left side again is what it's as listed, and then the right side is what it's going to be for me. The big thing here is the utility. So everything stays around the same, right? And I'll show you how I verify everything. Everything is verified, right? So they tell me the property taxes is $12,000. Okay, good. That's what they're telling me. I have to verify that. I have to do my own checks to verify that. They tell me insurance is whatever that is, right? That's their number. I have to figure out what the number is going to be for me. So that's kind of what it was. So what's the big difference here? The biggest thing is utilities, right? Like I said, they're paying for some of the tenants electric and gas. I don't want to do that anymore. So utilities moved from 11,000 to 6,000. $6,000. So that's the big thing. But then I anticipate that I'm going to need to do more things. So in other, which I explain on the bottom here, I'm budgeting $1,000 a year for bugs. You have a bug issue in the building. I'm budgeting $1,000 for tax returns, and I'm anticipating $1,000 for snow removal and landscaping. So even though I'm reducing however much I'm $4,000, I'm also adding costs. Again, these are all to be conservative, right? I don't want to say, hey, I'm not going to spend this money and then I have to spend it, right? I want to be as conservative as possible. I want to anticipate I'm going to do snow removal, right? I think this was self-managed before, so I think that the landlord was taking care of his own snow removal and landscaping. So I want to make sure I have that covered in my budget. So expenses ended up being kind of the same thing, but again, since I'm reducing, it's always a good thing when I'm reducing my expenses, which I do here. But then again, some other things come into play. So that's kind of what you want to do. You want to figure out what they are right now and what it's going to be for you. That's kind of the key. Expenses and income. Those are the numbers you're tracking. So why do I think rent can go from whatever it was to 1,100 dollars per unit, right? Run a quick check through Crexy. I believe this was a 2 mile radius from our building. Aside, so 20 buildings within the last year, like I think within the last 6 months, 20 buildings that went out to be rented. The max was 1,500, median was 1,125, mean was 1089. So if all these buildings that were rented within the last couple of months are all be able to rent for 1,100, I anticipate that I can also rent for that. What else do? You talk to your property manager. Hey, can we get these buildings in their current state with their current rehab status? So three bedroom apartments. Can we get them to 1,100? That's my goal. What is it going to take to get them there? He's going to give you a list. You have to rehab this. You have to give them this amenities. You have to give them that amenities, and then that can go there. So again, this is for me. I have verified my income. I verified my income. I've checked. I've seen what are other people doing, and that's how I know I can get what I think I can get. Another thing to do again is go on Zillow. Go on apartments.com. I'm a renter. Just assume you're a renter. If I want to rent a two bedroom apartment, 3 bedroom apartment in Indianapolis or in Hartford, Connecticut, where my market is, what would I get for what is currently listed right now? That's another thing to check. It's like today, if I wanted an apartment, how much can I get for a 3 bedroom? That's another check to do again. So you do those two things, and you should be good to go in terms of verifying where your income's at. So property manager, rental.com for rental analysis, and whatever search you want for like apartments. That's how you verify your income. Now let's talk about expenses. Fancy realtor that wants to make her deal look good is gonna give you a bunch of numbers. She's gonna tell you this is what the taxes are, this is what this is, this is what this is. How do I know that's true? Well, when you go in due diligence, they're required to give you their tax information, right? So this guy, City of Hartford, this is an official document from the city that says this is what their taxes are. I don't know if you remember the other sheet, but it was around $12,000. That's what this is saying officially. My attorney ended up pulling this document separately from what the realtor sent me. Numbers came out to be the same. Another thing that with taxes, again, that I didn't remember to mention before, but depending on the city, depending on the county, depending on what the laws are there, taxes can't adjust it for various reasons, right? So sometimes in some cities, your taxes can adjust based on a sale. So the county gets in a lot that this property just got sold. They could reevaluate the taxes. So you have to know what the taxes are going to be for you. Because this person is paying this taxes does not mean it's going to stay the same. In my city, I'm lucky that the taxes get reevaluated every 5 years, and it was just reevaluated the year before. So it was reevaluated in 2020 or 2019, and I purchased in 2021. The deal ended up going through in 2021. So it's not going to be reevaluated, purchase or no purchase, for the next couple of years, right? So lucky me. For your different markets, you have to figure that out. You call the county tax assessor's office, how are taxes evaluated in this market? You call them and say, I'm thinking about buying in this market. How? You don't have to tell them the address where you're buying, so they don't give you any trouble with how are taxes evaluated. Is a sale going to trigger a revaluation? Does it go up by a certain percentage every year, every 2 years? What is the status? You have to know that, because again, because they're paying this doesn't mean you're paying this too. You got to figure out what it is for you. Next thing, insurance, right? So he put his insurance number there. I have to go call a bunch of insurance companies. What can you give me? What is it that you can give me? So this, like I said, this is listed. It's a proposal, right? This was a proposal for me at the time, right? It wasn't final. It wasn't signed. It has proposal on top. It has my name on the bottom. And it was proposed. So I called a bunch of them, and I got the best deal I could get for. They will cover the building, blah, 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 all of that stuff. So you have to get that number for you, right? You're not going to pay the same insurance rate that the other person paid. right? They may have their car insured with the same insurance, and so that's why it's cheaper for them. Or they may have other buildings with the same insurance. You have to find out what it is for you. Call a bunch of people, call the guys you use, call somebody, have people recommend to you. You have to find out the number for yourself, right? Again, I'm just going line item by line item and verifying every single line item of the expenses to make sure it is for me. And then I think I did.
I have a quick question. Sorry to interrupt you. Do
Go
you
ahead.
do all of this analysis after you get into contract? Is this like due diligence?
This is all due diligence, right? So again, when I see those numbers, I make sure they're within range, right? So I've already done a bunch of analysis prior to putting this under contract. I already know that insurance should cost around this range. And so it's if it's around that range, I'm happy. So I'm happy to put it under contract. But then so they're not probably not going to give you their tax documents until it's under contract, right? They want to make sure you're serious. They're probably not going to give you a bunch of information. They're not going to give you their utility bills. That's what I didn't include here, right? So for utilities, before I came up with this number that I had here, I went and I looked at what the utilities are for common electric, for water. And so this utilities is only including water and common electric and trash, right? So I looked at what the bill was for the those two tenants that the landlord was paying their light and gas, and I subtracted that. So that came out to about $4,000 a year. That's the number I'm subtracting here because I looked at actual utility bills. I looked at his utility bills for the last 2 years, right? I looked at utility bills, I looked at his expense statement, I looked at his tax returns. So all these things are going to be listed on the tax returns, on utility bills, and in their P&L, so the profit and loss statement, P&L statements, right? So this number is not, this 4,000 that I'm subtracting from 11 isn't random. This is actual electric bills that I don't want to be paying anymore. That's how this number came about. So I didn't include that in this slide, but again, all these are expenses. You go through line item by line item and try to figure out what it is for them and then what is it going to be for you, right? Is that clear? Right, including utilities. So utilities, you're going to have to figure out, hey, what's the trend? What have they been spending utilities for the last 2 years, 3 years, whatever the case may be, and you figure that out, right? So numbers are not random. This is an analysis. This is not like you're not just putting in pretty numbers in a spreadsheet. So again, what's something else you have to do? Good old comps, right? You have to look at comps, look at what things are selling for in the market. This was buildings that were listed for $450,000. Most of the 6 units were listed for, and then that one right there was an 18 beds. I think this was either a bigger building or had more bedrooms per unit. One of the cases maybe. So these are all the things that you have to look at to analyze a deal. And then all in all, what do I anticipate? You run your numbers, you figure out what your expenses are going to be, and then you figure out what your debt servicing is going to be. This deal, I ended up doing 2 loans on it. So conventional loan and then a secondary loan to cover down payment for the conventional loan. And so I only had to put $23,000 in this deal. And my profit ran to around 38% on it's going to be, or that's what it's going to be in year 2 once I increase the rents and stop paying utilities, right? So this is the kind of things you have to do for running numbers.